Welcome to another edition of the Convergence. I'm your host, Derrick Maines. This week, we're going to have part 2 of my conversation with Lucas Petty, the AI daddy. This has been a really intriguing conversation in understanding how AI is going to affect our lives, our business, our investments, and our future. And I hope you will tune in and continue to tune in to our episodes over the coming weeks to talk about this emergence of AI and how it's going to affect everything we do. But let's pivot to that for a moment, because bias is something, I posted some things this morning on LinkedIn and almost, I bet you 2/3 of the comments were about how biased, racist, or misogynistic people found AIs to be. And, my point behind that was, you're not seeing an AI being racist, biased, or misogynistic. You're seeing an AI reading all human knowledge and extrapolating upon it, meaning that if you didn't believe in systematic racism or the patriarchy 4 weeks ago, well, now we have a system that proves that we actually are all of those things. And I think that's why the prompt engineering is really important. But what are your thoughts on that bias piece? What are you seeing as far as bias in these AIs?
That to me is a great question, because that's where, like, AI has been around for over a decade.
Yeah.
People have been building it. It's mainly been governments and big Fortune 500 companies who've been leveraging some of these tools.
Sure.
But it's so important. Like, Chat GPT has so many parameters where if you tell it to cuss or to tell you an appropriate joke, it won't.
Yeah.
And you could consider that a bias, but it's so easy to corrupt the data, what you're feeding into it, that they have to be extremely careful with how they're building. And I've heard a lot of people complain about, it's much more of a liberal lens to which AI can communicate. But if you, again, change the prompt engineering to say, hey, give me this as a diehard conservative, whatever, it will still give you that. You just have to work for it. It's not like the natural default. But in regards to the bias, it's such a tricky thing, because artificial intelligence, AI, I think I told you this joke. I told someone recently that I'm starting to think more and more that AI doesn't stand for artificial intelligence. It stands for actual intelligence.
Yeah.
And this is we haven't found it in humans, and we're starting to see it in the things.
Maybe now there's all those memes and like Far Sides about, I don't know if you remember the Far Side cartoon way back in the 80s and 90s, where like the aliens are like, they fly past Earth and they're like, there's no intelligent life down there. Well, maybe now the aliens will show up in like 2 or 3 weeks because they're like, hey, we found something. Oh, it's not those guys.
The reason I think of that joke is because it's not the machine that's biased in any way. You hinted at it before.
Yeah.
It is the people that feed it. And like, for me, I'm not afraid about artificial intelligence. I know some people are terrified at, taking our jobs, conquering the world, whatever. I'm not afraid of AI in the form that it exists. I'm afraid when AI can actually think like a human, because it is the human side that leads to the biases, leads to all the dangerous things in our world, the wars, the crime, all those things that we fear it from ourselves and from the people around us. You don't really, you only fear a building as much as the potential of it falling down, but only because the people who built it didn't build it right.
Oh, that's a really great point. And I guess it brings the libertarian in me to the forefront, where I don't like anything to be regulated. But I could certainly see in this instance why there needs to be some universal ground rules, and why we've even heard from folks like Elon Musk and others in the past that have said, hey, there's got to be some serious universal ground rules that go into AI, because if not, this thing could be used. This is way more dangerous than nuclear weapons.
Yep.
In the wrong hands.
The thing is, we are in the equivalent of an arms race for AI, because We are in such a pivotal moment, and it is truly scary. I won't deny it, because
Yeah.
every big company is racing to be at the top, to be the multi-trillion-dollar company that basically ends up owning and taking over the world. They won't say it, and they might not even realize it themselves, but the AI race is just that. Whoever has like the hands on the steering wheel or control over it is the one who's trying to be at the top. And so everyone's afraid that, China's going to have its own AI, Russia's going to have its own AI, and even within the country, Microsoft, Google, all these different companies. And so everyone's going so fast to develop the best AI that there is absolutely no way that any government, with how much bureaucracy, with how long, policy takes 5, 10,
Yeah.
15 years,
Never going to catch
we're
up.
not going to be able to really do anything about it because it's moving so quick. Honestly, I'm torn between it myself, where if this is where the world's going, do you want to avoid it and live in fear, or do you go along for the ride? Like, you're going to be dragged by it regardless, but if you make it a choice and if you're smart about it, that's where I've seen people who now do maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours of work a week
Yeah.
after I've helped them integrate some of their AI tools, and they're producing the same as their 40-hour work week, just with the AI, and now they're living their best life of spending so much more time with their family, their friends, the things that matter to them, and they're happier.
Is that? I mean, that's such a good point, and it's such a good pivot point too. And I've talked about this in the past in other broadcasts, talking about universal basic income and the need of world governments to eventually recognize that there will be a world without work at some point. Now, I didn't think it was coming in 2023, right? I think I thought there would be like a 3 at the beginning, right? We thought this would be 1,000 years from now, but we do have to start having this, conversation now. And as somebody who would like to be seen as a social critic and who loves philosophy, especially modern philosophy, these are questions that we need to start having from an ethics basis, from a philosophical basis. Is work a essential part of the human experience, or is work a burden that we will shed in the near future, that will allow us to be almost like, the artists in the king's court that just have, the backer to be able to do anything that we want to do in any way, shape, or form. If that means lounging around or creating art or discoveries or new scientific inventions or whatever that is, maybe it's just maybe one of the jobs of the future is just storyteller, right? That just can tell great stories about what it was like back in the past. But it's a radical shift, and it's not like a future thing anymore. This is a conversation that has to be brought to the forefront. And I mean, from what you're seeing, Lucas, is that on the horizon where we could find ourselves in a place where 50, 60, 70% of people don't have, don't need to work anymore? I don't want to say don't have to, but
I think that's going to be one of the things that the governments are going to have to figure out in their process of trying to balance out the power and regulate all these AIs. They're going to end up finding themselves eventually that all they can really do is say, well, our duty is to the people. Let's find a way to take care of them. And a universal income could come of it. But who can really say what's the time frame? But we just saw every new technological shift is getting faster and faster and faster. We're seeing companies reach billion-dollar valuations faster and faster and faster. It's insane. And people don't realize that like the evolution between, let's just say, a monkey and human beings, we might think about it as this long in the scope of things.
Yep.
But when we throw AI into the mix, all of a sudden it's right here. And where AI is going to be so exponential and so fast, the farther it goes. Because generative AI, one of the buzzwords you've probably heard, is basically it's learning with every new input. It's learning based off of what it's gathering with itself and what you're showing. So it's not that you manually have to teach it. Now, every single new experience, and it can have new experiences within its code, within its system, to continue to grow and improve. There's going to be a point where we won't even understand. We won't be behind the steering wheel anymore.
I'm so glad you mentioned steering wheel. If I can go off on that point for a moment, because as you were talking, it reminded me of, I think it was 2019, I gave a speech to a bunch of CEO groups, and I'm actually going to go back and visit and do that same circuit in April. So I know this is going to be a topic that's going to come up. But one of the things we talked about then was autonomous vehicles. And I was saying about how autonomous vehicles work currently, which is they are programmed and they learn some basic information as they're driving along. But in the future, and I think even right now we're seeing companies like Waymo doing this, the vehicles communicate with each other every night. Mm-hmm. Some of them do in real time, so they know each other's position in real time. So if they meet each other in an intersection, they can communicate and make data extrapolations to determine the best course of action. But in addition to that, what you're going to have at some point is where all of these autonomous vehicles every night upload all of their information to a database. And I was talking to some people who are leading, this was 4 years ago, that were leading in the space. And they were saying that their expectation is that each night, all autonomous vehicles would learn 1,000 years worth of driving lessons every single day.
Yeah.
Right. So the problem with that, and I addressed this one group of sort of larger CEOs that were in the sort of mid-sized companies that were approaching that $1 billion mark. And one of the CEOs was in the insurance industry. And he said, I will tell you that when you look at the charts, there reaches a point where the most dangerous driver in the world is anybody who's a human.
Yep.
And once we hit that point, and everybody's like, I'll never give up my license. And he's like, listen, if your insurance is $180,000 a year for your 25-year-old F-150, you're going to give up driving immediately, because the actuation tables show us that if we hit a certain point where these vehicles are autonomous, the only thing the vehicles are trying to avoid at some point is human drivers. So the only way, and then what I think was so cool about that is this insurance guy said, then we have to think about our infrastructure. He said, because why is the speed limit 75 miles an hour going on the 17 north to Flagstaff? Why isn't it 700 miles an hour? If all the vehicles are communicating with each other, if there's satellite or drone data that tells them where animals are and road conditions, why don't we drive at 250 or 300 or 400 or 800 miles an hour? None of those things matter anymore when you take the driver. So think about, I'm looking forward to the day where I buy a motorhome and I get in it, I go to sleep and I program it to go to Fairbanks, Alaska, and wake up and open the windows and I'm there. I mean, this is where our future is going.
Tesla already has all the driving that happens with its car uploaded into the cloud, and it all goes into this main system so that all of them are learning. It's insane. The things we think are science fiction are already happening now.
We just thought they were going to be the year 2000, and we're just 23 years off, right? All those 1960s movies. And when the year 2000 came around, we all laughed at them. But in the end, those things are coming to pass. And I think we are going to see them in our lifetime.
No, and what you mentioned about that time frame of how quickly the cars, the self-driving cars can communicate and learn to each other based off all the driving that happens overnight when they upload that. Don't quote me on the exact numbers, but a human's processing power, our neurons, when compared to the electoral nodes on a chip and its ability to process things, is the equivalent of what it takes us to process one idea, one thing, like an AI will have the equivalent of 1,000 years. So to think at that speed, at that capability, that's where like really this is going to be so exponential, so big, so massive that who's really going to be on the driver's seat?
So, I mean, the reality is that our perspective as human beings does change. And I really feel we're at that moment. And I'm so glad that we had this chance to talk today, because if you're listening to this and you're an investor, an entrepreneur, or even just a person in the general public, you've got to start thinking about this. Our world is radically changed. The creation of the wheel just occurred 2 months ago, or fire. And we have to figure out how to use this tool to our advantage. And there will be people that will be left behind if they don't figure that out. What's your best advice if you're somebody that's on the sideline right now? I have to assume most people don't. Chat GPT, I think we all probably know what that is. If you don't, it's part of the OpenAI project. You can go try it for free right now. Think of it like a Google search, but talk to it like it's a human being. Yeah. I think is the best way that I would summarize it. What's your predictions for the future here? I mean, or are you not at the place where you can even talk about that?
Before the future, I want to bring it back to the first question of what are some action items? What are things that the listener can get out of this? Because we basically just said the world's on fire and things are getting out of hand and things are wild. And that's where things can go. These are the fun ideas to discuss. And ironically, I challenge people like, this is like the first time where, it's fun to think about extinction or death by science fiction. If this was a natural catastrophe, if this was a genocide, if this was anything else, we would be talking about it in a completely different tone, and the level of urgency that the governments, that companies, that everyone had in regards to regulating or really coming together to figure out the smart way to do it.
Yeah,
it would be different. But because it's science fiction, and unfortunately, it's not science fiction anymore. It's fact. It's here. What can you do instead of just moping around and thinking, I'm losing my job, I'm losing my business, I'm doing all those things? Because to tie back my original story of the business that I thought was killed by AI, I realized I brought it back like 2 weeks ago. And I did it because after learning the tools, I realized, I could beat all my competitors like that. Now my company is producing 10 times the amount of business templates as any of my competitors. Wow. And just because we're using AI. And so bring it back to how the listeners can start with this. I'll give you the list to share with them.
Yeah.
The prompts and the 600 AI tools. They can go explore, have fun with it. And I think that's going to be a great way for them to just understand what's happening in the space for marketing, for sales, for video creation, for law. It's in every industry right now. But I want to give you my insight after going through all those. Almost 80 to 90% of the AIs use Chat GPT's API. It's a fancy word to say like it's code, the program. Yeah. So in essence, if you know how to use Chat GPT well, you know how to use all the other ones. And rather than rushing into just paying for all these cool new AI tools, I'd say play around with the Chat GPT free version if you haven't. If you're a beginner, that's where I'd have you start, because when you learn and you play with it, it has the easiest interface. Yeah. Then you're going to be prepared to go invest into Jasper if you want to do copywriting, marketing, any of these other ones.
Yeah.
And you're going to get the most out of it. Look, depending on what industry you're starting your business in, I wouldn't waste my time getting a bank account, an LLC, EIN, a DUNS, all these things. I would just go figure out a problem to solve, really define that problem, make very basic marketing things, to then go do A/B testing, to then go try and do pre-sales. And once money comes into the door, set up
Then
the
go do this.
entity, open up a bank account. But before then, don't waste your time. That's the reason why 80-90% of businesses fail, is because they try and do the step-by-step that's general and that's right, but it's not necessarily right for you, for your situation and whatnot. So I'd say start with Chat GPT, trust yourself, all the years of experience that you have, and start figuring out how you can speed up and optimize your processes. I mean, I think you can speak better since you're the operations guy,
Yeah.
but I often tell people, look, everyone always rushes to automation. They say,
Yeah, I don't ever rush to automation. This is a lesson that I always stop people. I'm like, no, don't ever do that. I call them chocolate pies.
Yeah.
If you just want to identify all your processes and automate it, all you've done is just bake a pie with a bunch of shit in it, because you got to go through that first and you have to refine it down and you have to get it. And I think you're the one that even told me this with the prompts on Chat GPT. Like, I'll do the first one and then I'll come back and ask it to restate it in a different, like, I'll see my mistake in the first one and I'll go, oh, wait, how about do it from a 16th century monk that has just been captured by, the Huns, right? I mean, do something crazy and see what it does. And then just keep asking it, almost like you're peeling an onion, where you're just asking it a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of questions over and over, instead of just assuming that the first result is the best result.
Yep. That's exactly the right way to use it. With every prompt, you won't get exactly the answer that you want, and you'll realize, oh, I need to change this. I need to add the audience. I need to add the revenue or the money I'm trying to charge for this negotiation. I'm using AI to negotiate for me. So just be conscious that don't stop after the first prompt. You have to go through a couple iterations to really get the quality answers, because it's not as intuitive as we think. We picture, the final product and a very clear idea of what our problem is or what we need, what we want, but to express it is completely different. And that's why I say don't rush into paying for AI. I know we just said the world's on fire.
Yeah.
But believe me, setting up that foundation is going to be really, really critical for once you go off to all the other tools.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And we do this a lot with the Process Fixer, my process automation company, is we want to observe for a long period of time. Like, we don't want to make any decisions until we've really observed and try to understand the patterns of things, try to understand truly what's happening. And then we use the Japanese method of the 5 whys. And I think it's a great example of what you should do with Chat GPT. Just never accept that first prompt. Keep going back over and over and over, at least 5 times, because once you've done that, you'll just start to peel this onion back and say, I love what you wrote for me, but could you summarize that in 250 words? Could you create an outline of it? Could you create a list of keywords based upon that? And just keep asking and asking and asking. And you'll start to pull these strings. You'll find a keyword and you'll go, oh, that's interesting. Can you incorporate that more into this? And then you can start to use, as you started to show me, some of these other AI tools, and you can take those keywords over and say, what are people looking at on the internet? Are they looking at anything around this? I have to tell you, I have a new client that we are doing a podcast with. We launched their podcast with the title and everything as they ask for about 24 hours, and it did okay. Then I went and used one of the AI tools you told me about, and I had it come up with a new title. And the title, at first we were even like, okay, that video has gone crazy ever since I changed the title, because the AI looked at what people were searching for when they were searching for that topic. And it looked at the types of keywords that would influence them to click. It did all of these kind of things. And then it came back and it said, here's the title for that video. And I think it gave me like a 72 rating on that. And it was like, your probability is very, very high that this is going to get in your audience if you do that. So it's about inquiry. It's about learning.
That's the power of these AI tools. that isn't often talked about. Like it's the data. That one that he's referring to right now is called Video IQ.
Yeah,
And
VidIQ. It's amazing.
basically it collects all the viewer statistics, all the data on YouTube videos. And then you go in, you type in whatever it is that you want to make content about, whatever you want to make a video about, and it'll auto-generate all the names that basically have the highest searches but least amount of results.
Yeah.
And will give you a number to say, hey, this one's more likely than not to go viral, to get a lot of views and inquiries, and just connect with people, because it's what people want. It's, but then the way I personally use it with my videos, because I've been really lucky that the AI trend has been going on for 2 months straight now.
Yeah.
But combining it with the use of actually incorporating the AI tools, using one of those videos, I'd say, I don't know, 1 out of 5 videos goes viral for me and gets millions.
I've been watching your stuff. I mean, and it's amazing how fast it gets picked up, because the AI has found a trend and it's asking you to capitalize on a trend.
Yeah,
which makes total sense. I mean, we've actually been using it here the last couple of days to figure out our next episodes for this podcast, because there's very specific words and phrases and topics that I would not have thought would have been what we should talk about. But the AI is actually saying, now, if you want traffic, here's how you get those eyeballs. Look, you are right that this is actual intelligence, and you are right that this is just data. The difference is it's impossible for me to hold 6 or 8 different worldviews in my mind all at the same time and extrapolate a poem from that. I mean, it isn't impossible. That's actually what creativity is. This is just, we've all dealt with creative blocks or writer's block and those kind of things. What these tools allow you to do is take the things that you're thinking about in your mind and allow it to sort of do some of the heavy lifting for you and go out and search the topics. I mean, I used to remember years ago when I'd be writing an article, I would just be Googling a whole bunch of stuff, where all we're doing is pasting other people's ideas together into our own thing. And I think that's what this thing does, is it just allows you, I mean, it is like it's like Red Bull for your creativity in a lot of senses. It can really help. Thank you, Lucas. For people to find you on social media, AIDaddy.io.
On YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, they just have to look up AI Daddy.
AI Daddy, and look for that mustache. That solves it every time, right? Because you are very identifiable. Like, you're gonna find him if you look for the mustache. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.